much for coming here today, Dr. Brook. It was interesting that you pointed out the figure of perhaps 85% of Muslims not following the strain of totalitarian Islam that you talked about. On this campus, and I would posit in America, the vast majority of Muslims are adamantly against the human rights violations, extremism, terrorism, and violence committed in the name of Islam. And I would posit also more so than non-Muslims. Most of us here in the Western world actually have particular cherishing of the religious freedom that exists here that doesn't exist in a lot of countries where our ancestors may have come from. There are also for example, the oppression that does exist in a lot of parts of the Arab world still today, and not all, are things that I think many Muslims in America would be vociferously against. And so you would think, you would assume that on your panel there would be somebody who was Muslim. Or you would think that somebody who organized such an event that's speaking about 10% that goes against the grain of the majority of Islam, that there'd be somebody co-sponsoring. But each time you have such an event and you tour around the country and the universities you visit, for some reason, there isn't that type of cooperative spirit with Muslims. And part of the reason I would ask you is because the arms are not open, they're not outstretched. There is almost a dishonest approach to this issue. One of, in some ways today, in your softer tone of speaking about totalitarian Islam, but another way, really referring to the Muslim world and those people who are out there as not having really justifiable reasons to be upset or justifiable ideas to be of their own, but that they simply have to acculturate to what your ideal is. I mean, in one of those you spoke out in the 19th century, Palestine was modern, savage desert with nothing at all. And there are Palestinians who are from villages out there, and I mean, I don't know what type of language it is to use, but it's something that happens on a repeated occasion. Just the other week, you wrote in a New York Times article, and I'm speaking about an Arabic school in New York, just a second, you mentioned that Muslims are infiltrating levels of government and through the political systems, and we have mosques that are built in this country, and there are campaigns against them. And
you have to
yes, just getting to that. And so this campaign, in fact, today you have yourself speaking in one way here today, but every other forum speaking in a way that intimidates and puts fear into Muslims. And here you have, and I'm asking the question, here you have myself, and just a second, and I am adamantly of that 85%. Can I ask you,
what is the question?
Why is it that you think that I am not with you? Why is it that you're not able to reach out to Muslims? Why is it that you're not able to build a cooperative spirit if that's what so many of us are willing to do? And how can you go about changing this reality?
First, let me correct some of the facts. We have had dozens of events on various issues related to the Middle East in American foreign policy since 9/11. On numerous occasions, in particular when we had panels to discuss the Danish cartoons, and we invited Muslims to participate in panels. We had, on several occasions, Muslims participating in the panels. Most of the time, we were rejected by all the Muslims we contacted in terms of participating on those panels. And if ever there was an issue, which in my view the Muslim community should have stood up and advocated for the publication of those cartoons, that should have been it. If you want to claim that you support the values that this country represents, freedom of speech is at the heart of the values of this country, and that would have been a great issue for Muslims in America to differentiate themselves from the radicals by advocating for publishing, not because you agree with those cartoons, but because you believe in the right of newspapers to publish them, and in the right. Wait a minute, this isn't an issue of free speech. This is my event. You don't have to come. You can choose to do what you want, but I set the rules. It's called private property. In my home, I get to dictate the rules. In your home, you can do what you want. Freedom of speech does not allow you to say whatever you want, wherever you want, no matter the context. The New York Times has a right. The New York Times has a right to publish what it wants on its pages, and in the face of intimidation, as there was after the publication of Danish cartoons, anybody who respects and believes in freedom of speech has stood up and demanded that the New York Times print those cartoons in the name of free speech and not allow itself to be intimidated by the threats of violence. So one issue is that I think that that while you claim, and I think it's true that 80-85% of Muslims in America are not radical and not, okay, you quoted a number of times as if you agreed with it, are not radical, and the fact is that those 80-85% who are not radical are not willing, not all of them, there are exceptions, and they're very brave exceptions, but are not willing to stand up and defend this country, and defend the values that this country represents, and to defend what this country stands for, and to defend this country's right to protect itself and to defend itself. And if there were more voices, we would welcome them. We would welcome them.
I'd like to look a little more closely at that 85%. I didn't mean to imply that 85% is moderate. I was simply saying they're not Islamists. They could be supporters of Saddam Hussein, they could be communists, they could be fascists, who knows who they are. The percentage of Muslims who are willing to stand up against Islamism is very small. Now, you might be one of them. I don't know you. I hope you are. In which case, I look forward to seeing the products of your arguments against Islamism. But in fact, the number of Muslims who are willing to do so is very small, and it's small for a reason. There's a price to be paid, whether it be in terms of security or alienation from the community or other forms of price being exacted. It's something that few Muslims are willing to do. Many more will quietly say, I don't like Islamism, than are willing publicly to say it. If you are one of those, I urge you to take a stand. It's very important. I began by saying that our policy should have two components. One is to defeat Islamism, and the other is to promote moderate versions. If you're in a position to do so as a Muslim, I see that as critical. I see Muslims who are anti-Islamists as having an absolutely vital role. To use a historical analogy, after the defeat of the Nazis, it required an Adenauer to create a modern, moderate Germany. It will require such politicians and thinkers who will create a modern Islam. I don't see where you perceive in me a blanket rejection when I'm specifically calling for this. And it makes me suspicious when I am so clear in calling for moderate Islam, and you do not hear it. It makes me suspicious of your motives.
I'd like to go to the next question, please. Go to the back of the line.
Next question.